Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. Today we're continuing our series on the culinary herbs that you can grow in your garden that have wonderful medicinal properties, and we're going to get into one that I think you'll find really interesting, at least I do. It is sweet woodruff. Now, sweet woodruff is a very interesting herb because it's not only medicinal, but it can be a substitute for vanilla. Now, you may think, well, how important is vanilla? Well, let's remember it's one of the most expensive spices on earth. When vanilla was discovered, I believe originally in Madagascar, it's an orchid that grows on trees in very tropical regions, grows up in the air, and it produces the vanilla bean. It quickly became one of the most sought after and expensive spices in the world. So much so that when Europeans came to Mexico and South America, one of the first things they did was try to see if they could grow vanilla. Now, vanilla in itself, we'll just say it's not strongly medicinal, and there are various sources for vanilla. Sweet woodruff, though, is a plant that tastes like vanilla that's also medicinal. But let's think for a minute, if everything fell apart, the blank hit the fan, as they always say, you're going to be looking for not only medicinal herbs, but you're going to be looking for a sense of normalcy and comfort. And what better than herbs you can grow in your garden, such as those that taste like lemon. I've talked a lot about lemon verbena and lemon balm and different herbs that have a lemony flavor to them. An herb that tastes like vanilla. Now, let me just go ahead and get through the controversy over this herb. It cannot really be legally bought and sold as a medicinal herb or even a flavoring in the United States. Pretty stupid, actually. Put this in the category of comfrey and sassafras. You may remember that comfrey and sassafras, back in the 50s, 60s, the government, maybe even 70s, the government did these studies where they gave lab rats the equivalent of 50 gallons of highly concentrated comfrey or sassafras tea per day, and said, well, it caused cancer in lab rats, we'd better ban the sale of it to humans. That would be the equivalent for you of drinking 50 gallons of highly concentrated tea. It's just not physically possible. These plants have been used for thousands of years by peoples in different places with no harm whatsoever. Of course, I have to give the caveat, if you have had cancer, you have a family history of cancer, maybe you want to be more careful with things. But to put it in perspective, Herbalist, interesting name, yes, I know, Skeeter Polarsson. Skeeter was a pretty popular herbalist and permaculture guy in the 80s. He was really into wildcrafting and foraging. He inspired a lot of people. He looked at the scientific studies, and he said that a cup or a glass, really a cup of comfrey tea was less carcinogenic than 1 can of beer. But comfrey has been banned for sale in the United States for human consumption. Same is true of sassafras. Sassafras used for centuries by Europeans and thousands of years by Native Americans, banned for sale. Sweet woodruff falls into that category. The Latin name is Galium odoratum, which means it has this sweet vanilla-like scent. Now, this herb has been used for, again, thousands of years in Europe, where it's native. Our government says it's dangerous, based on, in my opinion, no true evidence. If you're familiar of the scent of hay, you may be familiar with the scent of spoiled hay, It gets a sweet, vanilla-like scent. You might have been around sweetgrass. Sweetgrass has that same vanilla-like scent. There are a few other plants that have it. Those scents are caused by coumarin. Now, let's point this out. Coumarin is not Coumadin, the blood thinner. But our government treats them as one as the same. Basically, they want you to believe if you use an herb like sweet woodruff, you're going to start bleeding profusely from your nose and who knows what else, and probably die. Actually, Coumadin is like, I don't even know, 5,000 times stronger, the synthetic drug Coumadin, than the natural herb, the natural substance coumarin. And it would be really hard to hurt yourself on this. But I'm not recommending it. I'm just saying, I think it's stupid. And I really think it has more to do with those spice companies. You know, I said that vanilla was incredibly expensive. Well, those companies, like the East India Company, was once probably the most powerful company on the face of the earth. McCormick Herbs, different ones, Spice Islands now. They have huge investments in those vanilla plantations. They have a lot of political influence. I mean, you probably know the history of the East India Company. It was once one of the most, probably more powerful than the British government itself, actually. And one of the reasons our ancestors fought the American Revolution is they didn't want to be ruled by corporations any more than they wanted to be ruled by the English government. We're talking really powerful, really powerful. Now, they've lost some influence as chemists have figured out how they could extract vanillins, not vanilla, but vanillins from oak, for instance. You know how if you have a glass of bourbon or a Chardonnay that's been oaked, it has sort of a vanilla flavor? Well, that's actually because those vanillins occur naturally in oak. Nowhere near the quality of vanilla. Actually, nowhere near the quality of sweet woodruff. But they have a lot of political influence, and so do the cola companies. The cola companies have a huge impact, a huge investment in vanilla because that's an essential ingredient in many of the soft drinks you drink. So do the large bakeries that make all these vanilla cookies and such, Nabisco and all that. So it's very much not in the corporate interest for you to be able to grow a vanilla substitute in your backyard. Think about it. The tonka bean, which actually has almost the equivalent level of vanillins, and some say a better flavor than the vanilla bean, is absolutely legal. I think in the 1980s, there was a restaurant in New York where the owner began to make his own vanilla extract from tonka beans. Somehow the government found out about it, and they were raided by SWAT teams. I mean, this is serious, you know. But you can absolutely grow sweet woodruff in your backyard legally, use it legally, you just can't sell it. It's just like growing tobacco. You can grow your own tobacco. You can process it, you can smoke it, you can chew it. You can't sell processed tobacco. And I think sweet woodruff would be the same way. You could sell it in the raw form. I think, I'm not 100% sure, check the laws and regulations in your area. So now let's get into medicinal use. Really, this herb begins to show up in the Middle Ages. It was used as an additive to wine and for its aroma, like to put in drawers and such. Rodale book tells us in the 14th century, the plant was used in Scandinavia and England to make an herb water for cordials. In Germany, as early as the 13th century, the herb was used as a flower in May wine. Throughout the Middle Ages, woodruff used to be hung in churches and placed in boxes with lavender and roses on special days, such as St. Peter's and St. Barnabas' Day. Miss Grieve really gives us the authoritative entry of this herb in her book, A Modern Herbal in the 1930s. This is not one you're going to find used a lot in modern herbalism, but it should be, actually. She says it grows in shady places, deep green foliage, in the woods. That's where you're going to find it. So this is a good plant you can grow in shady areas where a lot of things don't really like to be in your garden. She gives a good description of it. It's better you just look it up online, you know. And it was also in Old French. It was called musk of the woods, and also used in a lot of cordials and mixed wines, herbed wines. She said in the 1930s it was usually found wild. It wasn't cultivated. in America, you may find it wild, actually. It wasn't native. It's gotten out. It's escaped. It's feral. But you're probably going to want to grow it. She says the powdered leaves were popular being mixed in snuffs, with tobacco. And you can see that. You like that vanilla scent in your tobacco sometimes. Really nice, actually. She said medicinal use and actions. Woodruff was much used as a medicine in the Middle Ages. The fresh leaves, bruised and applied to cuts and wounds, are said to have a healing effect, and a fairly strong decoction of the fresh herbs was used as a cordial and stomachic. It is also said to be useful for removing biliary obstructions of the liver. Like all plants that contain coumarin, when gathered fresh, it doesn't really have much scent, but as it dries, you start getting that sweet smell. And Gerard said the flowers are of a very sweet smell, as is the rest of the herb, being made up into garlands and bundles and hanged up, he said, 1500s England, in the houses in the heat of summer, doth very well attemper the air, cool, and make fresh the place, to the light and comfort of such as are therein. In other words, he used it as an air freshener. It was the Glade of his day. He said, it is reported to be put into wine to make man merry, and also good for the heart and liver. It prevaileth in wounds, and as do other vulnerary herbs. In Germany, it was used to treat hiccups by steeping the fresh sprigs of the herb in Rhine wine. That's just a light white wine. I can't find Rhine wine anymore. I can't find many of the wines that were popular even in the 80s and 90s. You go to the store these days and it's all Chardonnay, Cabernet Sauvignon. You hardly ever see a Rhine or a Leap from Milk or a Rhone or a Bordeaux. I haven't seen a Bordeaux since I was a kid. I don't know what's going on in the wine world. I can't even find a Chianti anymore. Chianti's a really just pleasant Italian table wine that used to be cheap. Like $5 a bottle, and it's made from good quality grapes. Stores don't carry it anymore. I don't know I think there's probably some kind of cartel that represents American winemakers that's forced out really superior wines from Europe that were cheap. When I was a kid, my family had a store, a bottle of Leaf from Milk, which was a really light, pleasant, sweet, light-bodied white wine. We had a lot of customers that liked to get it. You were talking $3. Seriously. Nice imported wine from Germany for $3-4. And Chianti maybe $5 at most, probably more like $3.99. And now you go to a store and what are you going to get for $3.99? Boone's Farm, Night Train, Thunderbird. You're not going to get a quality wine, much less something imported from a 300-400-year-old vineyard where they really know how to make really nice wine. I think something's going on there. But anyway, the sweet woodruff was also used for stuffing beds. It made things smell better in a time when things didn't smell that great in the Middle Ages, but it also may help kind of repel some bugs and such. So really good to have around. They say especially combined with lavender, it would prevent things from being infested with insects. So for many reasons, you might want to have this in your garden. It's a nice ground cover. It has attractive white flowers, shade tolerant, so good for places where sun-loving plants won't grow. It's perennial, so plant it once. It rarely grows more than 9 inches tall. It's best propagated by root division. So if you can get a plant, divide it and plant about less than a foot apart for a ground cover. If not, you're going to want to get some seeds, and you're probably not going to have a great germination rate. You might have 100 seeds you get going and get 10 plants, but one plant is all you need for root division. So if you're lucky with that, if you get one going, you're good. Hardiness is from USDA zone 4A to 8B, so that's like Maine to Florida. Northern Florida at least. So you're good just about anywhere. Doesn't really like a lot of dry conditions though, so if you live in a more desert area. Now speaking of herbs that are hard to grow, tarragon. Now I love tarragon. It's one of my favorite